As a preliminary matter, this is Brian Sullivan, Chair of the Affordable Housing Trust. Permit me to confirm all members and persons anticipated on the agenda and present and can hear me. Penny Dye.
Here.
Dave Iverson.
Here.
Thank you, Dave. Rima Sherry.
Here.
Meg Browers.
Here.
And I think that's all I see for members. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Christy Ferrantella.
Here.
Vicky Marsh.
Here.
And Ellis, we saw you and heard you before.
Here.
Great. And Tucker Holland, I guess we put you in the consultant category.
Present.
Excellent.
Brian,
Thank
did you
you.
get Tom?
Yeah.
You did?
Oh, there's Tom. Hey, Tom.
Oh, we have
Tom, can
Tom.
you hear us?
Yes, thank you.
Anticipated speakers on the agenda, please respond in the affirmative. Let's see, who do we have? Jerry Keneally?
Here.
I think Ann, we have you on for something today.
Present.
Great, and then we have some members of the public. Welcome, thank you. Good afternoon. This is an open meeting of the Affordable Housing Trust conducted remotely pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. For this meeting, the Affordable Housing Trust is convening via video conference via the Zoom app as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Please note that the Zoom meeting is being recorded. All attendees are participating via video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you. Take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda until we note otherwise. We'll turn to the first item on the agenda, but before we do so, permit me to cover ground rules for effective clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I'll introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or your computer when you're not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly in a way that helps generate accurate meeting minutes. For any response, please wait until the floor is yielded to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in conversation with other members, please do so through the chair. For items with public comment, after members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment to those members of the public that have joined the meeting via Zoom. Members who wish to speak must state their names clearly and be acknowledged by and speak through the chair. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted via roll call. With that, I will move to the agenda. Alice, do you have any commentary on the agenda as it stands? I think the only, go ahead.
So November 13 meeting minutes, we won't be voting on them today. I emailed you on that spreadsheet. It explains why. And also November 29th.
Okay, great.
But we will be voting on November 17 and December 5th. And you should have the spreadsheet that says who was in the meetings.
Okay, great. I will try and
Thank
put
you.
that in front of me.
I can.
Yeah, I might need you to put that in front of me. So coming back, Christy, any other adjustments to the agenda? I think we need some flexibility on Judy Barrett's line and being able to move it to when Judy can join us, which I think she said 1:30 p.m.
Correct.
Okay. Anybody else? So I'll look to approve the agenda with editing November 13th and November 29th for a future meeting, and then the flexibility to move Judy Barrett's presentation as needed. Is there a motion? Thank you, Meg. Second?
Second.
Second from Rima. Roll call. Penny Dye.
Aye.
Dave Iverson.
Aye.
Rima Sherry.
Aye.
Meg Browers.
Aye.
And Tom, where did you go? Is Tom still here?
He was on his phone. He might have gotten.
Okay.
Tom.
Okay, so Tom's out. So Brian Sullivan's and I. With that, we'll move to the approval of the minutes. We'll take them individually. So the first one will be November 17th. Ellis, could you let us know?
Yes. So for November 17, we had Tom Dixon, Meg Browers, Penny Dye, Rima Sherry, Shanta Blues Murphy, which she just got in the meeting, and Brian Sullivan.
Tom, Meg, Penny, Shanta, myself, and I missed somebody.
It's everybody except Dave Iverson.
Okay, great. Thank you. Are there any comments on those minutes, edits, changes, or an approval to, or a motion to approve?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Tom. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Shanta. By roll call, Penny Dye,
Aye.
Rima Sherry,
Aye.
Tom Dixon,
Aye.
Meg Browers,
Aye.
Shanta Murphy,
Aye.
and Brian Sullivan's and I. Dave, I skipped you because you weren't in the meeting. The December 5th minutes. Ellis, do we have?
December 5th, everybody was present.
Great, thank you. Are there any edits, changes, comments to the minutes as written? Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
second from Rima. By roll call, Penny Dye,
Aye.
Dave Iverson,
Aye.
let's see, Rima Sherry,
Aye.
Meg Browers,
Aye.
Tom Dixon,
Aye.
Shanta Murphy,
Aye.
and Brian Sullivan's and I. Thank you. Going to open up public comment, but I will note that we have a monster agenda today. So if we can have public comment succinctly, I would appreciate that. I do think we have some members of the public here. Mr. Jack O'Brien.
Hello, I'm
Hey, everyone.
Mr. Jack O'Brien, and this is
I'm Rivers West. We are two college students on the island, working with a program called Semester Cinema, which is a larger film program that's working on a narrative feature. Under that program, there's a group of us, around 7 students and 2 mentors, Patrick Kennedy and Jasper Craven. This smaller group, we are working on a documentary on the island concerning the housing crisis, and trying to get a wide variety of voices with that. Do you want to speak more on that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So we are making a documentary about the housing crisis, and we just wanted to sort of familiarize ourselves with you guys. We want to essentially get as many viewpoints as we can about the housing crisis, and we've talked to a couple members. We've talked to Sully, and we had a lovely conversation with Mr. Tucker Holland earlier today, and we've talked with the Warming Place and different organizations such as that as well. So we're trying to cast a wide net and just get a bunch of Nantucket residents to give their opinions on the housing crisis. We are not looking to solve it because, quite frankly, we're not equipped to. But we're trying to pose the question so that it will be more accessible to a larger scale. And then we will hopefully be able to raise awareness of the attempts that are being made to try to alleviate the crisis, and bring together more people to think about it, and ultimately help out. So thank you for your time.
Great, thank you, guys. It was really nice meeting the other day. I encourage the guys, the students, to come to public comment if there's any interest or opportunity from the trust for a future meeting as an agenda item. We could potentially add that to the agenda. Gentlemen, virtually, I'd like to introduce you to Jerry Keneally, who is on as a member of Habitat for Humanity, who's very successfully developed a number of properties. You should probably work to connect with Jerry at some point about his experience and successes and struggles over the years. With Penny,
Yeah, a couple things. You should also add to your list, if you've not already, Ann Kutzpa, Housing Nantucket. They oversee the Covenant program as well as a house recycling program. And I would think it would be probably smart to speak with the folks that are running the shelters at the different churches and the warming place.
Yes.
I would think it would be good to try and get some perspectives from people that are actually at the more extreme end of the crisis.
Absolutely.
I think they've made some of those contacts already. I did encourage that they go back and watch the town meeting vote for Article 58, Tucker. Because the conversation was very interesting and compelling at the time, and the various people that stood up. Tucker?
Yeah, exactly, Brian. We talked a little bit about that this morning. I just wanted to say, very impressed with the work that this team is doing. Really thoughtful questions. I'm expecting something absolutely fantastic when they're done. I have no doubt about it. And the more that they can connect with, as you mentioned, Brian, folks like Jerry and Ann and others that are doing the work, and also stories. I think that was one of the things that they were hoping to capture, was someone who is willing to talk on camera about their housing challenge. So if anyone knows anyone who might be willing to do that, I have an idea or two, but I think we're going to want to send as many as we can their direction.
And we can leave our emails in the chat here
Yeah.
for anyone to contact us.
Is there a chat?
Is there a chat?
I'm not very Zoom equipped.
There is a chat.
We'll put, you know what we'll do? We'll put Ellis's email in the chat so then you can get your information to her and she can distribute as needed. I'll come to Penny then, Tom.
Yeah, sorry, I can't figure out how to raise my hand on this device. I'm traveling. Just quickly, what is your time, sort of projected time for trying to finish this? Like, how much runway do you have here for interviewing people?
Yeah, we're hoping to have it wrapped up by the time of the Nantucket Film Festival. So hopefully by early June, the edit will be final. There was some discussion. We may have a shorter, more punchy doc for the film festival, and then expand it more to give us a little more time in the future.
Yes.
It's like, go ahead.
Us students will be on the island until early May. So we hope to have interviews, from my understanding, finished by then. I think May 5th is the exact date. We're trying to do the bulk of it in April. But like Jack said, final cut by June-ish.
Okay, slightly off topic, but please speak with the program director at Nantucket Film Festival about the length, because there's been some variety about what's acceptable. Thanks.
Penny is a fellow filmmaker, just by the way.
He's the Nantucket Oscar winner last year.
Another time, another story.
I'll come to Tom and then Jerry.
Yes, Mr. Chair, through you to Jack and his colleague. The organization I work for oversees the warming place. I'm also a select board member. My email is on the town website on the select board page. Feel free to reach out to me at any time.
Thank you very
Wonderful.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Jerry?
Jack, could you please just send a short letter of introduction, who you are, what you're trying to do in your time frame, and then maybe Ellis can send it to her and she can give you all the emails here, because I would like to forward that. We have 16 homeowners that a few would be happy to speak, and it's much easier than me trying to explain what you're doing, and your contact details so all of us can send it out and get you some good feedback.
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. Guys, thanks for joining today. Mary Mac, did you have some?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention one thing. Maybe you could ask some regular, ordinary residents that try to help with the crisis, like who rent apartments affordably and have been doing so for quite some time. Just a suggestion.
Mary, if you can help put any of those citizens in touch with Jack and his colleague, that'd be great.
Okay, sure.
Okay, with that, knowing we have a big agenda, guys, I want to thank you again for joining us. If you do want to come back at a future scheduled agenda, happy to do that. With that, we'll move on. Please feel free to stay, learn, and observe or watch the recording at a later date if you don't have time.
Brian, just, sorry,
Go ahead, Alice.
I couldn't put my hand up. If, I can't find the chat on the Zoom, so, I'd like to just share my email information with Jack, so they can, email me.
Please, go ahead.
So it'd be E Ramos, ERAMOS at nantucket-ma.gov.
-ma.gov.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Take care.
Is there any other public comment for today? Mary, you have your hand up from, I think, previously, but I want to acknowledge it if it's new.
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to put it down.
Nope, no worries. Okay, seeing no other public comment, I'll close public comment and we'll move to approval of CPA grant agreement, Affordable Housing Trust, Habitat Wake Drive, Affordable Housing Project action item. Christy, do I throw it to you and then?
Yes, happy to introduce it. So in February, the Affordable Housing Trust and the Select Board approved a $4 million grant to Habitat for Humanity for the construction of 6 homes on Waite Drive. And this is the grant agreement that will be executed for this agreement.
Great. Jerry, do you want to have an opportunity before I go to members of the trust?
Yes, I just want to say thank you to Vicky for all, and Christy for all the help with pouring the foundation on 2 of the homes today. So we're starting work and very happy and looking forward to working together. And with Christy and with Ellis, we have set up a schedule that would, for our repayment of any bills that we submit, be 10 days prior to the select board meetings. So all good, and thank you all.
Great. Thank you, Jerry. Vicky, can I come to you for commentary or instructions before we go to the board? Or you disappeared?
I'm sorry.
Oh, now you went mute.
Sorry.
There you go.
I'm technically challenged today. And I apologize for my dog in the background. So I would just ask that you, the agreement has been finalized. I would just ask that you vote to approve and to execute the agreement on behalf of the trust. And then I believe Jerry and I think it's John, we're supposed to be executing the grant agreement as well. And then once the agreement is fully executed, then, funds can be applied for and released from the grant.
Great. Vicky, is this an authorization of one person to sign or the whole board?
If you want to just have one person to sign, you may do so. Absolutely. Just have a vote that would include the authorization for either the chair or the vice chair to sign.
Okay, great. Are there any members of the board with questions, comments, thoughts that they want to share? Seeing none, any motions? Penny?
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we vote to approve the CPA grant agreement from the trust to Habitat for the Waite Drive Village Affordable Housing Project and authorize the chair to sign on behalf of the trust.
Is there a second? Second from Dave. Any commentary on the motion? Seeing none, take a vote by roll call. Penny Dye.
Aye.
Dave Iverson.
Aye.
Rima Sherry.
Aye.
Meg Browers.
Aye.
Tom Dixon.
Aye.
Chantal Murphy.
Aye.
And Brian Sullivan's an aye. Excellent. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Vicky.
Thank you. Great news.
Vesper Lane Parking License Agreement Review Action. Vicky, you're up.
So the hospital has come to the trust to ask to use a portion of the trust property at 16 Vesper Lane for parking for hospital employees for the summer. And I have sent over to the hospital's council a draft license, which I believe you have a copy of there. Do you have a copy? that you
You're,
have? So look-
Yes,
Okay.
document 10121.
Okay, and so, I have not heard final, approval yet from hospital council as to the version that, of the license. But, I did get a brief, email saying that everything looked pretty good. They were just waiting for the, hospital to get back to them. So if you are so inclined, you could vote to approve of the license subject to final approval by the hospital and town council's approval of any proposed changes. And that way, I know that they're anxious to get this done. That way, they wouldn't have to wait for another meeting to have another vote for the final approval.
Thank you, Vicky. With that, are there questions from members of the trust? Tom?
Yes, Mr. Chair, through you to Vicky. Vicky, has the town manager, I'm sure she's looked at this, or town admin, and is aware?
So I have sent, when I sent this document out, I always copy Libby as to the document that I am proposing. I haven't heard any further comments from her as of now, but I certainly will follow up and make sure. I just want to point out that this license is similar to the license that we used for the storage container arrangement that we had with them for them to be able to put their containers there. It's very similar, very few changes to it. So I would not expect any problems with it. The only thing that we really weren't sure was the location of the parking, and I'm waiting to see a plan of that that we would also be able to see. But that's really the only other issue.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Anyone else? Rima?
I can make a motion if everyone's
Great.
ready. I would move to approve the Vesper Lane parking license agreement with the hospital, subject to a final plan and final approval by Nantucket Cottage Hospital, Town Administration, and Town Council.
And does, Vicky, does this need authorization for a signature?
Yes, if you're only going to
And authorize the chair or vice chair to sign once it's approved.
Second.
Thank you, Rima. Second from Penny. Dave?
I just think it's important we make it clear for anyone watching or watching later or reading the minutes that this is in Gwen Village. Because I think if you just, people are like, Vesper Lane, where's that? So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Well, with that, in Gwen Village, this is the property that we swapped, and the intent is that employees of the hospital are going to be able to park there this summer on property that the trust owns, as in a matter of clarification. Thank you for that, Dave. So we have the motion from Rima and Penny. I think you seconded. Is that correct?
Yes.
Any more discussion? Seeing none, a vote by roll call. Penny Dye.
Aye.
Dave Iverson.
Aye.
Rima Sherry.
Aye.
Meg Browers.
Aye.
Tom Dixon.
Aye.
John Tom Murphy.
Aye.
And Brian Sullivan's an aye. Great.
Thank you.
Make progress. Vesper Lane. Parking license agreement. Item 7. The Howard Dickler Award. Christy, I will come to you. We're back to this time of year, so come to you on how we're going to move forward.
So I'm going to share my screen. And can everybody see this?
Yes.
So this is the 2023 write-up that we had on the Howard Dickler Tribute Award. So last year was the first year that we introduced the award to honor Dr. Dickler and everything that he did to advocate for affordable housing. Last year's recipient was Billy Cassidy, and that was announced at annual town meeting. So last year, we had a due date of February 17th, and we'd like to get this out into the community and have nominations proposing by April 12th, so they can be reviewed at the trust's next meeting and before the May 7th annual town meeting. I just want to put that out for discussion and happy to answer any questions.
Go ahead, Penny.
Oh, you can see me. Okay, good. I wanted to verify that nominations can come from any quarter, including members of the trust. It's a question.
Yeah, I'm gonna say yes, I believe that's accurate.
And it was true. That was the case last year. And you might want to remind the inaugural recipient that there's an honorarium to be designated to a nonprofit.
Christy, what are the opportunities to get it out in the public? Can this be included in Libby's newsletter and an independent housing newsletter? Maybe we can reach out to Habitat and or Housing Nantucket to share the information with mailing lists. Okay.
So I can just share my screen again, but in your packet, I just kind of had a outline that I'd work with the communications department to have a press release go out shortly. April 1st would be in the town manager newsletter, and we'll get to it at a future agenda item today, but we're working on a communication strategy leading up to annual town meeting, which includes a newsletter from the housing department. So we'll make sure.
Yeah.
Great. Shanta?
Christy, to Christy through the chair, I just want to add that just a little reminder that the town does have an MOU for communications with the Chamber of Commerce. So we do have access to that email list as well.
That's a good one.
Perfect.
That's a great one. Penny?
Yeah, I want to just remind everybody that having it announced at town meeting was agreed to last year. Somebody needs to approach the moderator and not assume that she's going to do that this year.
Rima? Oh, I think she's volunteering.
Yeah, no, I can do that. I wrote.
Just so we don't do it at the last minute. Thank you.
Yeah, no, okay.
And then procedurally, Christy, the intent is to accept nominations. I guess we'll call it a blind vote for the lack of better. And then the results will be delivered to the moderator for announcement. Great. Okay. Any more questions, comments, Penny?
Yeah, I just want to add, and we keep the results of that vote in confidence until town meeting. I just want to remind people of that.
Great. Well, exciting that we're already there again. With that, I think, any more, Christy, or can I move on? I'm going to crush this agenda. Item number 8, Lease to Locals program. Christy, why don't you start, and then I know that Julia is here, and then we'll pass to Julia and go from there. Oh, and Colin from Placement is here as well. Okay, go ahead.
So back in September, the trust had a briefing on the Lease to Locals pilot program. And since then, we've had a few public comments from people asking for the trust to continue that discussion of helping the Lease to Locals program past its pilot program. I'm happy to turn it over to Julia and Colin. Just also wanted to let the trust know that Sully and I had a conversation with the Provincetown Assistant Housing Director about their program that they're about to roll out. But I think it's important to see the presentation from Colin and Julia first, and then I can help address some of the questions of how Provincetown is rolling out their program.
As a municipality versus as a non-for-profit.
Correct.
So we'll open to Julia and Colin, and the two of you can decide how you want to roll.
Thanks, Brian. I am actually going to take a minor role here. I really wanted to take this opportunity, and thank you again for putting us on the agenda, to introduce Placemate in a direct way with you guys and see just what kind of value they are bringing to the table, because quite frankly, none of the success that this program has had on Nantucket would have been possible without them. I see them as a huge, just a huge asset to, whether that's their systems or their professionalism or their expertise, their advice, and the way that, the experience they have from rolling this kind of program out to other places. We didn't find anyone else who really could have done what they've done. So we're really happy to sort of come up with the, have Colin present to you the update for the pilot. So we launched in September. He's going to give you a little bit more detail about this. We launched in September, and at the beginning of the new year, January 2024, we were forced to pause the program, and not for lack of success, just we basically have run out of money. We have allocated over close to $450,000, and he'll go over some of these details. And now we're building a wait list. So the goal was always to figure out, like, is this type of program for is it going to work on Nantucket to convert, units that were not used as year-round rentals into year-round rentals? And if it is it something that we can continue as a multi-year program? We've always looked at this as, and I think Colin understands this really well and can elaborate on this, like, it is not a long-term solution to housing. You guys are looking at a lot of long-term solutions, right? You're looking at medium term, you're looking at building, and that stuff takes time. But while you're doing all that good work, the Lease to Locals is just such a great program to really come and fill the urgent need. And the last thing I would really want to say on, sort of the lessons learned, and I know I brought this up when I spoke to you the last time we were before you, is beyond the Lease to Locals model, which is converting units that have not been used as year-round rentals into year-round rentals. There is definitely the need, and I know I've talked to Christy about this and some potential solutions. There is definitely a need for trying to preserve or incentivizing homeowners to a lesser degree to preserve the year-round rentals that we do have out there. And you guys already know about this, but certainly my experience with this program has brought that to light. So I'm going to introduce Colin. Colin is one of the founders of Placemate. He and his wife, Kai, founded Placemate, and he'll go through sort of a little bit of history on them, this very young and successful company, and talk to you about ways that, we're looking at year 2, but that's really why we're before you guys. Was what Christy mentioned, we're hoping that you guys, certainly the program could be adapted to funding requirements that you guys might have. I'm happy to take those questions later. But I think I'm just really glad that Colin showed up and can show you what good work they're doing. So I will hand it off to Colin.
Great. Thank you, Julia. Go ahead, Colin.
Yeah, thank you, Julia, and thank you all for having me here today. I'm coming to you from Portland, Maine, just as an FYI of where I am in geography. I'm going to share my screen and open up a presentation. Get into present mode. So today we're here to talk about the Lease to Locals program and introduce my company, Placemate. I know you guys have a packed agenda, so I'll keep the beginning part, the background on our company and Lease to Locals program to a minimal, but we have a lot of really interesting updates to share on how the pilot's going, as Julia has mentioned. And then we have some ideas and sort of a discussion on how to move forward with your potential involvement to keep the program going in subsequent years. As Julia mentioned, it's on hold as of right now for funding. So that's what I'm hoping to cover. I can't see everyone raising their hand. So if you want to just stop me because you have a question about a term or anything I'm talking about, I will not be offended. Please just talk over me and then we'll stop and address that. If you have a question, someone else probably has a question. There's a lot of inside baseball in terms of the terminology in some of these slides. So I just want to make sure everyone feels like they can stop me, address any questions or concerns you have. As Christy said, one specific thing with Provincetown, we can have a whole chat about that as well. So first, a little background on our company. We started this company in 2019 with a vision to help local employees find stable housing in tourist towns. Our mission is to do that through innovative public and private partnerships. So the idea was originally we're going to be the Airbnb for locals housing. We realized as we were living in a tourist town of Truckee, California, my wife and I, and started partnering with the town itself, and that kind of spurred the whole idea of the Lease to Locals program, which is this interesting public-private partnership. And in Nantucket, it's private in a lot of ways because it's our company and a nonprofit. But what we're talking about today is how to make it a potential public private partnership. So the idea on the programs at a high level is that we saw the need, and as Julia mentioned, in the short term, to convert existing housing stock by providing property owners cash incentives to help them, essentially the local government and the towns address missing middle housing needs. So every program is slightly different. We run these programs across the country. You can see we've got a little cluster here in the Lake Tahoe area because that's where we started. So we launched in Truckee. We have 2 contracts in Summit County and Eagle County, a contract in Ketchum. And since we have relocated to the East Coast, Nantucket obviously launched in partnership with Julie's organization. And Nantucket, and Provincetown is in final procurement. We are in contract to develop the program, and there's an RFP process that ends in a week or so. And then the goal is to launch the program April 1st at their town meeting. So that's the background on where we are. Specifically for Nantucket, as Julia mentioned, it launched in September. There was $450,000 put aside for incentives, and the goal was to convert 20 units. So this is a little picture of the postcard that was sent out to second homeowners, and done other marketing in various channels to reach those mostly second homeowners. The way the program is structured today, and this is modeled off of successful other program policies, is that the property has to obviously be located on Nantucket. It can't already be being rented to year-round full-time residents in the last 12 months. We're trying to find and spark new 12-month rentals. So it has to be a new lease. Kind of go into the middle part. There's a rent cap in place. Has to be a 12-month lease. And then the incentives are based on the size of the unit. I've got a slide for that, up to $27,000 from an employee or sort of who lives in the house. At least one member of the household has to be working year-round on Nantucket. And there's some sort of incentive encouragement for families, for children. I can dive into any of the specifics, but the program policies are public, right? We put them on our website and talk to people about how it works. Most of the time, owners, when they're coming to us, the first question is, how do the incentives work based on the size of my unit or who I put in there? So this is a little bit of an eye chart, but if someone calls me and says, I have a, back cottage and I want to put 2 people in it, they could earn up to $18,000 if you go from 1 bedroom, max incentive if you put 2 qualified employees in there. So this system, allows for some flexibility. It gives us, the idea of that could be larger units, could be smaller units. We didn't really know what we would actually see happen because this is not like we're building the units, right? We have to go out there and with an attractive dollar amount, try to convince people that this might be in their best interest, and then get them to do a lot of pretty heavy lifting. Change what you're doing already. Maybe block your calendar if it's a short-term rental. Not have your friends and family maybe use your back unit, that kind of thing. So, basically what happened is we got a really, really good response to this. So kind of coming out of the gates, big interest in this. 95 property owners have reached out to date. Julia mentioned, with the preservation, there's quite a few that reached out and said, I've been doing this already. I've already been renting long-term for years. So they're an incentive for me. So we disqualify those people, but keep them on a wait list of if we ever decide to go back to them. And then there's a handful that are not interested. The rent cap of $5,000 a month might be too low. We have people that say, hey, I could get 20 grand a week for my unit in the peak summer months. This isn't going to fit, but they wanted to just kind of see if it would. But ultimately, 22 properties, and there are a few more that are in process of finalizing. 22 properties converted. The conversion rate of almost a quarter, so 1 in 4 people reaching out. That's really high compared to other markets. We typically see about 15% on average. So I think it was really an effective program that high incentive amounts compared to other markets, and really thoughtful around the rent cap and kind of gearing this for the Nantucket market. Saw a really good conversion. In terms of the breakdown, typically we like to kind of show a couple of interesting nuggets when we're presenting back on what we've seen. So again, the sort of program is on pause, but most of the leases were signed with move-ins happening at the back half of last year or back quarter of last year. And it's a nice split of various units, but most coming from short-term rental or seasonal rental. So more than half. A couple of people that had recently purchased a property, a couple of people that were converting a primary residence or an empty second home, and a couple new construction. The breakdown, which is interesting to see, is we saw some larger units than we expected. 3-bedroom. We saw 7 of those. So you'd think that that would be, incongruous with how much money you could make on the short-term rental market or personal utility, but that was really encouraging to see that. And we were spending about $9,000 per bedroom, for these units, so across the board. So I'm just going to keep going. If I don't hear any questions, just rattle through this. In terms of the tenants, the program has housed 54 total people. 46 of these were qualified tenants. Again, the incentive is paid out based on local employment, or we allow, as I said, children, caretakers, people with disabilities. There's some carve outs here, but 46 people that contribute to the local economy in some way. And then average rent has been $3,200 per month. You can see the median and range down there. And the average rent per bedroom was right around $1,800 per month. Keeping going on the results, 23 local employers were represented in those tenants.
I have a question, Colin. The $1,800 per bedroom, to understand that is the post-subsidized value of the bedroom, right?
That's what the tenants are paying. So the homeowner, to your point, the homeowner is going to get a little bit more money. Obviously, if let's say that we're renting a 1-bedroom and they got $9,000, they're not reducing the rent $9,000 1-to-1, right? That's what this is what the tenant paid.
Okay, I'd be curious on a follow-up if we could understand the value of an average bedroom and the average rent with the subsidies.
Sure. Yeah, we could do that.
I think Penny has a question.
Yeah, I'll try and clump them together. Thank you. Are any of the subsidies, are they passed on to the tenants in any way?
Typically not directly. What we do see is people say, well, if I get the full $18,000, then I'll reduce the rent. Some people have had like 2 prices, right? With maybe 1 tenant or 2 tenants, right? So it's not exactly 1-for-1. Typically the value that we're saying to somebody is, hey, you're foregoing the opportunity to rent it short term. This might bridge the gap for you. So typically the way I see this is these units are this is about creating availability, and the secondary sort of vector is affordability. We're trying to keep these under $5,000 a month by having that upper end rent cap.
Oh, thank you. My second question has to do with, is there any income qualifying taking place in terms of the tenants? And do you have to comply with federal fair housing laws?
Sure. So if I go to, I'll stay on this slide. We do, the way it was written with Julia and Act Now community initiatives, that we did not have an income cap for this, but rather just an employment cap. As we've, kind of envisioned this program, it's for local employees. We'd like to see basically 2 pay stubs and an employer letter. We do end up collecting a lot of that information, so we have it. We just haven't aggregated it for the needs of Act Now community initiatives. It's not built in. So we have mostly complete data on income. I just wasn't able to pull it in time for this presentation, but certainly in other places, we do have an AMI cap, either by the household or by the qualified tenant level, and that's really easy to modify. We've seen, if you look at this list of employers, it's a nice mix of people working in, sort of tourism, right? Working in restaurants, working in the trades, kind of the hospital, the school district. When Julie and I kind of looked at this, we didn't see any really, really high earners that would have, sort of brought pause to something like a, 150 or 240% AMI. So while it's not explicitly built in, I think if we looked backwards and looked forward, it'd be very easy to add an income cap.
So just my last question then would be, if it's tied so heavily to employment, how does that impact people that are retired or unable to work? They can't participate?
They can participate as a non-qualified tenant as it's envisioned now. In other markets, we do allow for retirees if that's a concern. So we can always layer on and change the program policies. And I didn't include a slide on, we've converted about 600 units across all of those markets. We basically have never had the situation where a retiree has wanted to be part of a group, or it was a group of retirees. So it's certainly an edge case that we could accommodate for if we felt that it was necessary. In terms of unable to work for disability, we do have a carve out for that where they count as a qualified tenant if they can prove their disability. And then I think to address your question about Fair Housing Act, so we've had program policies reviewed by every town or county. You know, this is public-private partnership in every other jurisdiction. And Fair Housing Acts, sort of there's the National Fair Housing Act of protected classes, and then Massachusetts and California have the sort of next layer down, which is a deeper fair housing requirement for protected classes. And we've had fair housing lawyers and county staff and Provincetown's council, who I believe is also Nantucket's council, John Giorgio, has reviewed this and said, we don't think any of this violates any fair housing. In fact, it's encouraging. The guidelines are fair and written with fair housing in mind. So there's been nothing raised on that. We've never had any sort of issues raised there.
I ask it only because we are using public money here. So
yep, and all the other jurisdictions are public.
Thank you.
Rima?
Yeah, through you, Brian, to Colin, I was wondering, do you keep track of owners continuing leases past that first year? And if you do you have a percentage of people that do continue renting year round? And how do you do any incentives to encourage that?
Yeah, great question. So we haven't had a single one of these leases obviously come to the full term of the year. And we've told most owners that, hey, this is a pilot program. We're not sure there's going to be an additional year or additional incentives beyond the first year. In 7 out of the other 8 jurisdictions we work in, there are no additional incentives after the first year. So it's kind of to spark the conversion and hope that it stays. And more than half have stayed as long-term rentals without an additional incentive. It's been as high as 80% in the town of Truckee at times. It kind of oscillates based on market factors. So COVID threw a wrench in things because in a town like Truckee, the median household income, the same thing happened in Nantucket, doubled in 18 months. And so there was a lot of pressure on owners that decided they wanted to sell, take the money off the table. And so, the Lease to Locals program might have been a good stopgap for them for that year where they're deciding what to do. We don't require that people keep renting long-term, as Julia mentioned. This is meant to provide a stopgap as new units are coming online. Most of these programs are envisioned to run for 2 to 3 years, and we layer on preservation programs in other markets as well. So we're in the process of rolling one out in Truckee. Really, it can be customized. So I think if we felt like with the 23, 22 properties that are currently in Nantucket, our thought, Julia's thought as well with Act Now Community Initiatives, is we probably want to offer a second incentive for those homeowners that are interested in continuing as long as they meet the terms. And maybe it's not the full 100%. So we have a request at the end of this to sort of talk about what that funding request could look like. I think if we offered additional incentives, we could keep more than if we didn't offer them, obviously, but some percent would keep renting just because we sparked the conversion. They have good tenants, they're happy with it. The arrangement worked, but some are going to go back to short-term renting unless we give them more money to keep doing it, just to be totally frank.
Thank you.
Sure.
Colin, I have a question on a possible incentive opportunity. Have you investigated the ability of a property owner to receive or to make a tax deductible gift of the incentive in future years? That could be an interesting way to get
I haven't thought about that, but that's great. Provincetown has some interesting things they're layering on, which is reduction in property taxes all the way up to like no property taxes if you're renting at a certain AMI. There's ways in which obviously, we would love to explore. If you guys have ideas or there's things that are coming down the pike on your end that we could layer on. I mean, this program is meant to be adaptable to the local market. So we got it off the ground in September. I think as Julia mentioned, we're now envisioning that it needs another spark of life, right? So if that looks like a different structure of the incentive, Penny, you mentioned passing it on to the tenant, we could think of interesting ways to, adapt this based on your feedback and ideas.
Great.
Awesome.
Didn't mean to cut you off on the slide, but okay, I think we just covered a lot of great questions. Let's keep rolling.
Yeah, this is great. Okay, so here are the list of the employers. So a couple of notes: Nantucket Cottage Hospitals had 9 employees. I think I saw Jack on here from the hospital, so they're very encouraged. And also we've seen the public school district have 3 employees, so just a couple things to highlight here. And then really what it comes down to, I think, where we want to spend the rest of the time is sort of talking about where we are today and where we envision this could go in the future. So currently, as Julia said, 43 bedrooms. Sorry, excuse me, I'm jumping ahead. So currently the program's on pause. We have 20 property owners on the wait list. Those are people that said, I'm interested in this. I would do this, at the end of next summer. Most of this is, in the next 6 months, they want to participate in this program. So we have a really good teed up wait list of people. If we kept the incentives exactly the same, it's not to say we would, but we could, that would be a maximum of $448,000 for new property owner participants. So that is a really encouraging thing to see, is that people they know that this is on pause, but they're still interested. We could, re-engage them pretty quickly. And then Julie and Act Now Community Initiatives are looking to continue to fund the operations to basically keep us working on this going into a second year. But the kind of discussion here is if we wanted to talk about the Housing Trust participating from a financial standpoint, we want to look at this as what's an amount of money that could have an impact. So I think, Remy, you had a question about renewals. So if we wanted to allocate, let's say $250,000 towards those first 23 properties, we think we could keep about 40 people housed. If we did nothing on that front, that number might be half of that. We don't actually know, right? We haven't checked in with those owners. It's a long way from when the lease ends are, because they were just signed in the last couple of months. And then if we wanted new property owners, either from the wait list or to expand it, we suspect that a $250,000 to $500,000 incentive amount would be enough to unlock another 25 to 50 bedrooms and house about 25 to 50 people. So this is really kind of where the discussion, I think, for you guys, and you've had some great questions so far. Happy to answer any altitude question in the weeds or sort of in the clouds, whatever makes sense. But I think my presentation is basically over. I'm happy to keep my screen shared to go back to slides, or I can unshare. We can all see each other again.
Why don't we unshare for now? I think the packet is in or the slides are in the packet.
Great.
Any members with questions? Go ahead, Meg.
You through you, Brian, to the placemate, or actually Julia, do you foresee Act Now funding any portion of next year's potential operational budget? If you've already
if I may,
that,
Brian. No, that's
Go
okay.
ahead, Julia.
So what we, that my role has scaled back to basically Act Now Community Initiative. So this is my focus. And in thinking about year 2 and going forward, we believe that we have existing funders to pay for like managing the program, hiring placemate, doing all of the, sort of office work or whatnot. So the idea that, what we're looking for is, the heavy lift of, because, as fundraising is a huge deal, Meg, particularly. And so, we don't have a development person. This is me part-time, right? So what can we achieve with a low amount of dollars? Like, this is not going to be a costly thing, but, we want to hire a placemate. That's important. So it's, we're talking about 150 to maybe upwards, maybe closer to $200,000 a year. And that's what we would basically go out and find, and those are, I think, from the foundations that we have right now, I think we will be able to find that. And that's why we're looking for help on the incentives. Does that make sense?
Any follow-up, Meg?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Julia. Dave Iverson? You're on mute.
I didn't have my hand up, but since you called on me.
Sorry, I thought that was a lingering link.
Listen, I applaud what Julia and Placemates has done. I think that it's admirable. I think that it has a lot of very good qualities. I just question whether this is something that we as a community, we as holders of taxpayer dollars should be spending this on when we have a multitude of our own programs to fund that that would address these things in a more permanent manner. And I don't want to sound like I'm poo-pooing this, because I really believe that this is helped 50 families or put 50 people's in beds. And I think it's a great program, but I also think it's a great program for it to be funded by the private sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Where'd Colin go? Oh, there you are. Colin, I'm curious about, you mentioned you're in Portland, Maine, and then I guess program oversight, right? So you set up we'll call it kind of matching situation. Once the lease is in place, is it strictly the homeowners kind of policing the tenants? Is there oversight, Julia, from your organization kind of checking in through the process? Or is it, we don't hear anything, we don't know anything, we kind of move along? What does that look like?
Yeah, I can take that question. So I think just sort of start about the actual match, right? So Placemate has a matching mechanism on our site. We collect renter profiles, homeowners can post their properties, they can connect. We do not play property manager. We don't take a role in the lease signing. They sort of decide, is it a good fit, just like they would on the open market, where we come into places to make sure the tenants are qualified, and if they are, to what degree, so the homeowner can understand and sort of participate accordingly. So that's the first part. We talk with owners, talk with renters. We don't need to be in Nantucket to do that, because it's all done electronically. We have phone calls with owners. We qualify the renters electronically, and then we submit all of that to right now. Obviously, it's Julia and Act Now Community Initiatives, and there's lots of agreed upon documentation and things to back that up. This is a long-winded answer, but I'll get there. And so then the next step of the process is, once it's paid, there's a 6-month check-in with the tenant and the homeowner to see how things are going, make sure the tenant's still in place. We call it a mid-lease check-in. And then we do the same thing 45 days before the end of the lease, where we check to see what their plans are. If we had an additional incentive to layer on, we could dangle that, or dangle that earlier if we had that committed. So we're in basically 3 touch points with the owner and the renter, beginning, middle, and end. And the check also, I will say, is cut in 2 installments, so they get half their incentive from a homeowner standpoint up front and half at the end of the lease. So it's not sort of like we get it and then we just hope that it all worked out well. We also do have a system in place for checking on year 2 and year 3. I think Benny mentioned like what happens from a retention standpoint. So we have the mechanisms. Julia hired us because we built this system originally, sort of in-house, and now we've brought external developers, have pretty sophisticated systems, because we're running this with thousands of tenants and hundreds of properties across the country, and we have to keep the sort of lens of, hey, this is a publicly funded program in most jurisdictions, so we need to have a really good audit trail, protecting information. There's a lot that sort of I don't have to go into today, but the idea here is we want you to feel confidence. We want people to feel confidence that there's some compliance and auditing that's even built into our contracts of exactly what I laid out.
I froze there for a second. I have one more follow-up question. Is there a fee that Placemate collects on the transactions, or just the fee to manage the program?
It's the latter, just the fee to manage the program.
Okay, great. Tucker?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Through you, I guess this is a question for Colin. I think this is terrific, what's happening with the program here. I guess I'm just wondering, and this may have come up when Julia came to give a presentation about the program last fall. In terms of, so it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, Colin, that the folks who are the property owners who signed up to participate this initial year basically made a 1-year commitment to provide housing, given they get the fee that's agreed to and so forth. Is that So there's no promise beyond year one. Is that correct?
Correct. Some have signed up to, like, the longest lease we have is a 19-month lease because they want to get into, like, let's say spring of 2025. We require a minimum of 12. I think we have one 24-month lease as well. But yeah, again, just the 12-month minimum requirement.
And then, so on the renter side, I guess I'm just wondering, people understand that this is they're signing up for something with a definitive timetable, so that they could find themselves without housing after the 1 year or what have you. Is that, I guess I'm thinking about some of the other markets that you talked about, where I'll use Truckee as an example, that it's possible, and I don't know the landscape super well there, but it's possible that if something didn't work out for a second year there, that, okay, I may have to drive a little further to get to my employment, but there might be other options. Here, we don't have that so much. And so I just am trying to understand what the expectation of the current renters is.
Yeah, I think similar to what I said with the homeowners, echo this is, we tell the homeowners, this is the pilot program. You shouldn't expect that there's going to be, for sure an additional incentive, and you should communicate to the renters what your expectation is at the end of the term of the lease. So most owners, I think, and renters, just like with any 12-month lease, nothing's guaranteed. I think depending on how they structure the lease, a lot of them say they terminate at the 12-month mark. And so we're very clear about the program, and we set the expectation with the owners. And when the renters sign the lease, we don't have an explicit call out to say you're not guaranteed housing after the 12 months, because we don't know the terms that they discussed. Some of them are talking about it'll roll the month to month. We're not getting in the middle because we're not the property manager. So we tell owners, make sure if you're going to do this, you're having a really good feeling about your tenants and you're going into this eyes wide open and communicating everything in the terms of the lease with them. So we're not reviewing the lease for things like the parking and pets and those sort of things, right? Like, again, I think I have to remind, sort of the role we play is in facilitating, not with, it's not a paid transaction. So we're not facilitating every transaction in that way, right? It's more of, we're program administrators to make sure the program requirements are set and we have our built-in check-ins. But to your point about the landscape in Truckee, sure, you have the opportunity to go down Reno. There's Nantucket's an island, so I think that could be something we certainly stress more in a place where housing insecurity means you leave the island, you leave your job, you leave your employer in the lurch, right? There's a lot of cascading effects of the housing insecurity on an island, and that's something that we're open to feedback on how to communicate. To date, it doesn't seem like it's been an issue, and have had renters ask the question of, I think Penny asked, like, hey, will I get a rent reduction from this? Hey, how long is this program meant to last? Do you have other properties in case that one ends? So we're not, sort of naive to this being a short-term fix that has sort of inherent sort of stressors built into it. But a lot of things I'll say is that, those 54 people put their heads on beds that may not have been available if this program didn't exist. And that meant they would have maybe left last fall or been in a more insecure housing situation. And I think data has shown, and we hope even without an additional incentive, some number of those beds will remain filled with those original tenants. And we can obviously increase that percentage. But I think this program is flexible and nimble to the local needs, right? If that makes sense.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Colin. Thank you, Tucker. Penny?
Yeah, just a follow-up, Colin, to Tucker's question, which is, what you're going to know so much more after this inaugural year, I should think. And do you have a sense of when the majority of your leases were signed and when they're ending? Because if it's April, it's a whole different crisis than if it's October.
They all were signed on September 1st or later. I think the last one was signed for February 1st, and there's one coming up April 1st and one May 1st. So that's all you know, it's not to say that that isn't something we want to get ahead of, right? Because September is coming up soon. I had my first midpoint check-in with an owner who said, I would like to continue renting and would love to hear if there's the opportunity for incentives, but you know, TBD on what actually happens with that one. So we have a little bit of time because you know the 6-month mark for these leases is all coming up here in the next couple of months for the most part. But you know, from a timetable standpoint, it would be great to have this program kind of re-energized in the next few months if that was possible.
And secondly, have you considered or examined a way to enable people who are already doing this, renting at below market year round? It seems like they shouldn't be excluded. I understand the original goal was to convert those properties that were doing short-term rentals, and you've done 40% of those. But is there a way to include those that have been doing this because it's the right thing to do?
Yeah, great question. We call that sort of bucket preservation, and that's been sort of our next you know, program that we're developing with the town of Truckee. They did lease to locals in 2020 is when it started, and we've had over 150 property owners say, hey, I've been renting long term and I'd like to keep doing it. They're developing a 3-year preservation program where a smaller incentive is given over 3 years to encourage people to keep renting. And the idea is actually they're also standing up a deed restriction program. So at year 3, you'd have the opportunity to then essentially deed restrict it and or sell it to your tenant. So it's kind of a feeder into other programs. Our strength has been implementation partners for local housing departments where they say, these are the goals we have. Can you help us develop these programs, implement these programs? So, you know, that's really where I've hired, and it was a team of just my, you know, husband and wife, literally, and we've hired a team of 6, and we're kind of embedded into all of these different housing departments and hearing about programs like deed restrictions and preservation and even short-term rental regulation. Like, we're getting involved in a very meaningful way. Lease to Locals is our kind of hero program in a lot of ways because it's effective, it's fast, it's cheap relative to building. It's not the only arrow in the housing solution quiver, but it is an arrow that can be deployed quickly and efficiently. And so that's kind of why we're here today, is to say this is the opportunity for you to evaluate how this could fit in your other priorities. And you know, David, I understand, you know, there are lots of other programs you're funding. This one has the potential of being another one that has been stood up and gotten off the ground and been successful. It's, I'd say, one of the most successful programs in terms of how quickly we got it off the ground, got it launched, and got heads on beds, so to speak. And so I'm encouraged to hear your feedback and see what you guys think about potentially funding this to keep it going.
So I have one more final question.
Yep.
Which is, who handles the tax reporting? I mean, the 1099s?
Yep, 1099 currently is issued by the funding source, which is Act Now Community Initiative. So it's sent out based on the year that it was issued.
And then in communities where it's publicly funded, who does that?
The checks in the public ones, the checks in the 1099 are issued usually through the internal accounting finance team of the town or county. So, you know, where the funds come from, they're always the ones issuing the tax documents.
Thank you.
Thank you, Penny. Christy?
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up to Penny's question about, you know, how to help people who are already renting year round. And Colin mentioned something that Provincetown does with lowering taxes, and they're actually the first town to do it, and it's now a statewide local option, and it's called the Good Neighbor Tax Credit. And we'll be talking about it at next month's trust meeting. But I just want to put on the radar that that's something, you know, that could be in tandem with a program like this, where you could be helping year-round landlords who are already renting year-round to reduce the tax.
Thank you, Christy. Meg?
Thanks, Brian. I want to just simply voice my support for our consideration of how we might be able to work with the existing program to just explore the possibilities here. I think that that Act Now has done a great job of exploring this option of getting the program off the ground. Finding housing for 50 families is not a small feat, and as we know, people are moving off island every single week. because they can't stay in the places that they live. And I think while we're finalizing our year-round deed restriction program and working to build out units, it's a long ways off for the next program or the next development to get off the ground. And I think that what we need to be doing is focusing on getting people housing in the immediate term. And I love this concept, so I'd just like to voice my support of it.
Thank you, Meg. Vicky?
Thank you. Colin, I had a couple of questions for you about the program that and your role, the Placemates role in it. So how long will it take from the time that an entity decides to do a program like Lease to Locals, and from the time that they come to you and the time that it actually gets up and is running?
Yep. So the kind of near-in use case or answer to that question is Provincetown. We met them in the fall at the Housing Cape Cod. Oh shoot, I'm going to butcher the name of the conference. It was in Barnstable, and we met Alex Morse, the town manager, in I think it was October 15th, and we're now launching in April. That was basically from scratch. Getting it in front of elected officials, getting the funding allocated from the sort of they're in year-round housing trust is sort of the similar trust here. So there's kind of a couple of steps that happen. Typically it's 3 to 6 months is the sort of short answer, but that's the kind of most recent sort of data point, October to April. But that also took a while to get the first meeting. So really the action happened, I'd say, January to March, right? 3 months of real sort of intensive negotiations and discussions and building the program policies and all of that. We would be starting not from scratch here, so that could expedite things as well.
Mm-hmm. And so just to understand, do you design some of the program guidelines, or is that designed by the municipality? How does that work as far as
we have a blueprint of program guidelines that are, operational and easy for participants to understanding. And so we kind of break it down into like, these are the buckets for consideration. But often, our counterpart might be a housing manager within a housing department. And so they'll have a rubric of, what they want in terms of the program compliance. We usually aren't writing the program policies as much as informing them. Just because it's good to have arm's length, right? We're independent contractors, so keep it kind of independent. But again, they're all localized based on what they want, with then us raising considerations of all the contingencies. What if an owner sells halfway through? We should put that in writing, right? We've been through enough of the motions for 3 years of running this program and hundreds of leases that we can kind of inform what should go in those program policies, but they'll make the final call. Those would be usually put in front of elected officials to also weigh in on things like AMI caps and required number of hours and where should the employer be based. It's a little easier in Nantucket. You'd want the employer based in Nantucket, but in other places you can decide, do you want to go a little farther out? Provincetown was deciding they want to go how far down on the outer Cape, right? These are decisions that we won't make, but we'll give the ramifications and let them weigh in on.
Okay. And the last question I had is about documentation. So being town council, I'm looking at the documents that are drafted. Does the town hire, for instance, would the town council be the one that's drafting these documents, or do you provide form documents? How is that set up in most of these municipalities as well?
And you mean documents specifically for like a
lease or an agreement between say Lease to Locals and the homeowner, perhaps? I mean, I would envision there's some kind of agreement.
Yeah, we have lots of agreements. Typically they'll be presented to council, COU and SEL, that council, to make sure that they agree that that's the level of documentation for contracts that we'd want. So we have a suite of things that sometimes a county versus a town wants something different, and ultimately, we will give you options, but we have a lot already built, so that makes this potentially easier and to expedite the process.
Thank you, Vicky. Colin, I have one last question. Well, actually, it's a multi-part question. Did you say, are any other municipalities or people that you're working with offering a reoccurring fee or no?
One is Summit County, Colorado. Their program required that it was an active short-term rental. and they wanted to keep it off of the short-term rental market, so they kept offering incentives for multiple years. But then they ran out of funding. They spent $2 million on incentives in 2 years and paused the program. So it ended up being a very expensive program because it, kind of ballooned into the next year. New participants and returning ones were getting the same amount. So that's the only place where we've done it. Every other market has decided not to offer an additional incentive, knowing that some would go back to what they were previously doing or sell or whatever. But it can be tailored based on what the local jurisdiction wants.
I think like one of the things that's jumping into my mind, and I'm curious how you've contemplated it, is I don't think we're at the unit count now, and probably not with your waiting list either. But how will a continued subsidy like this affect the non-subsidized market, free market value of year-round rentals, right? If people are out there capturing these subsidies, are we going to see increased financial burden on units that are already year-round rentals, right? Like we're going to keep inflating the market price of these units.
Your inflated market price of the non-lease to local units, you mean? Like they would raise their rent?
The lease to local units is creating a higher value of those units that a comparable non-lease to local may not be charging. Thus, the price in the marketplace will continue to chase up. And so how do we manage that in a way that we're not continually infusing dollars? Like, I don't want it to become more expensive that somebody's already not in a unit. So I'm just trying to think of the longer term unintended consequence of supporting. We want to get the conversions and we hope that the people maintain, but we don't want to artificially increase the cost of the existing marketplace.
Yep, and I would suggest the way we look at that is to go into it with multiple years considered and what the step down is, so that you're not forever having 100% incentive and affecting the market that way. So if we have property owners that signed up in September of 2023, we're now thinking about maybe they get 75% in 2024, 50% in 2025, and then 25, and then kind of like there's a schedule of step down. And you're right, like it doesn't have a big impact when it's 20 units, but if it gets to 200 units, there's a lot of dollars and there's a lot of potential impact that I think we'd have to think through at the outset versus just wondering and hoping it doesn't happen, right? Like let's poke holes in it. Let's put a schedule together. And dollars, exactly. Because I think that that's something that I'm trying to kind of educate all of the jurisdictions on as well. I think, Meg mentioned this. People often say, oh, I've got a big project coming up in 3 years. Well, let's actually think about this for the next 3 years and what this could look like and what the commitment would be and how we might impact the market. And then how those potential tenants could then potentially slot into those units that are coming online. So I think thinking about it holistically would be great.
Okay, great. Well, it's been super informative for me, so I'm really appreciative. Tom, I think you might be the last question unless Meg, is yours a remaining hand up or? Okay. Tom, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Colin. Colin, I just have a couple quick little questions. One is, do you know what Provincetown's current funding commitment is to the program as they're looking towards it?
Yeah, they're putting $350,000 into the program for a pilot, with indications that they want to be oversubscribed quickly and go back to the select board and get more money. That would be a good problem to have. Their incentives are going to be lower than Nantucket's by about 25%. But yeah, they have put $350,000 for the pilot.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. And then in your conversations with Alex Morris, the town manager of Provincetown, and also I know there's a couple folks on the Provincetown Select Board who are very versed in housing issues, who I'm sure you've spoken to about this. I'm curious, did they say anything about any complications on how difficult it is for town finance, et cetera, to paperwork, tax statements, et cetera? I am a little hesitant on creating an additional burden on town staff and town resources to create another new program, but just wanted to get any feedback you had on that.
Yeah, and Alex is the acting housing manager and the town manager and a few others. So I think he's very well of overburdening his staff, and they have a deputy housing director that will be the sort of main point person. There is a big upfront sort of capital intensive part of this where you need to align on program policies and you need to be thinking about what documentation you want. But then once it's set up, the systems are pretty straightforward. They're not meant to be burdensome. They're meant to be like, here's your checklist of what you need to review. Here's your lease, your supporting tenant documentation, your W-9 from your homeowner, any LLC documentation to prove the ownership, right? It's a package that once you've agreed upon what that package is, and I think there was another question about like, do you already have a lot of the templates and things for us? Like, we're not building this from scratch, so we can usually expedite the sort of burden on the sort of staff resources. And also, most of the time when people hire us, they say, I love working with you because I don't have to hire a full-time staff to run this program, and it's cost effective versus an FTE to hire you to do most of the legwork. And they can ask us to do additional things like, hey, we'd like to survey tenants to understand, I think it was Tucker's point, hey, let's do a tenant survey and make sure they understand what's happening after year 2. Like, we will do a lot of the heavy lifting and work. We try to unburden staff. I think it's a long answer, but that's my answer.
All right, so yeah, so basically, since you've been working on with other states, and now that you've moved on to another town in the Commonwealth, it's not reinventing the wheel. It's kind of yeah. Okay, and then my last question is just on in general. So I work for, my day job is Nantucket Food, Fuel, and Rental Assistance. So we do rental assistance, and so this is not altogether in a different universe than this, and we do a lot of landlord vetting. And occasionally we get complicated cases where somebody comes to us for assistance saying they're the landlord and they're not the landlord. And I'm not saying that this program has had that, or I'm not casting aspersions at all. I'm just curious about the level of vetting that you would go to on Nantucket to make sure that the folks who are looking for the subsidy / payment are kind of who they say they are, and that the reasons, and that if they say it's a 1-bedroom, that it is a 1-bedroom and not a shared room, etc. So if you can just briefly kind of expand upon that, I appreciate it.
Sure. And I could maybe, if Julia's still, I'm not sure if she's still online.
I'm here.
Julia, do you want to talk about, we've run into this where you've done a little bit of that to help sort of provide local context about potential landlords and units. We've done some inspections. Is there anything you want to share about that?
Well, I think, from my perspective, this has been a big focus, Tom, because we did not want a bad apple to sort of ruin the, sort of reputation of the program. So from the get-go, it was important that we work with Colin to figure out what kind of paper trace, like, for example, okay, we've been focused on making sure that, so the property owner is, I believe 100% of the time, the landlord. And we can vet who the property owner is. And this is Colin does all the legwork, but then if there's some final work that I need to go through, for example, if it's an LLC, he'll get the certificate from the state to make sure that they're in good standing. So there is, I think there's good identification, a methodology there for who the landlord is. Obviously, we get a copy of the lease. And does that answer sort of the part about the property owner, Tom?
Yeah. I just was curious about sort of the level of depth, because after seeing this at my own organization, again, which is somewhat different, but they are in the same universe. It's just, there are so many different layers of complications to this. So I'm kind of coming from my own experience.
Yeah.
And my spot on the trust and saying like, okay, well, I want to hear how you guys have thought about this and kind of work through it, just generally.
So where I think it gets a little bit trickier, I would say the property owner landlord identification is rather simple or usually straightforward. It gets a little trickier when you're trying to prove the employment on the island. Because, it's really easy when it's someone coming from the town or the hospital or the schools, right? The employment letter, the pay stubs, that's super straightforward. It gets a little tricky when you get into the self-employed scenario. So I, as a complement to Colin's work, have come in and done my own legwork to figure out, is this local business actually on Nantucket, right? Is this individual working on Nantucket. So there's been some, and literally that is through other business owners verifying that this is, there's been some work in that sense. And I think that's where it's been just a little bit trickier because there is hardly a paper trail. But I think my experience working with Placemate is that because they've done so much of this, if we get into a wrinkle, we get on the phone, we get on a Zoom, and I'm like, okay, how do we deal through this? Can we modify the process so that we don't run into this issue? Can we ask for this up front next time? So that's been where I think there's a ton of flexibility and willingness to, improve the process, which has been great.
Thank you, Julia. Christy, then Tucker.
Thank you. Through you, Brian, I had a question probably for Julia in kind of relation to Tom's question around like kind of burden to town staff. And would the request be for the trust to provide a grant to Act Now community initiatives and they would continue to execute a lot of the program, or would it be the town issuing an RFP and working directly with us?
Thank you for asking that question, Christy, because I was about to sort of come in and say, look, from our perspective, what we've been hearing, and I can totally appreciate this, is that the town is not necessarily interested in another program and burdening staff further. If you want this program, I mean, please let us know and we can definitely migrate it. What we were under the assumption of this should continue to be a public-private partnership as much as possible. We have it pretty down in terms of managing the program and doing, the sort of overhead stuff that needs to happen, the reporting stuff that needs to happen, coming back to you guys with whatever reports, whatever update frequency you'd like. The intent is not to burden the town. Obviously, we understand that if the Affordable Housing Trust gets involved in terms of funding, yes, the program guidelines might need to change. And we've always had that in mind since crafting the first guidelines, like introducing an AMI, for example. So we're not worried about that. So if you have a different view of how it should look, or it could look, then obviously we're open.
Thank you, Julia. Tucker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple additional questions, Colin. I just was wondering, in the other markets that you have experience in, whether after sort of a one-year pilot program, you either have enacted this or you think there is receptivity for signing up for longer than a 1 year commitment, engaging the property owner on a longer than 1 year commitment. And I mean, this kind of has traces back to my earlier questions about, not wanting to see someone lose their housing after 1 year. And so if a housing opportunity went away in these other markets, if you were someone who was in housing, the owner didn't renew, you were otherwise a good tenant and you income qualify, are you kind of at the top of the list for the new units that come in that might fit your household size?
Yeah, great question. So for that first, I'll work backwards from that the second question. So yeah, we have had tenants that have switched from one property to another. And we don't give priority if you've been a lease to locals tenant because we're not making the selection. Again, we're not the property manager. But what we can do is sort of say, hey, here's the available properties on our site. If they, email us and say, hey, my owner's choosing to sell his unit and I'd love to see if there's any lease to locals properties, we give them the tools to update their renter profile on our site and go to the listings page. Typically owners, I'd say about more than half the owners are finding their own tenants outside of our site. And so they aren't looking for us to identify tenants off of a list. This is, again, not as similar as a normal sort of affordable housing project where you have a wait list and AMI bedroom price is this, it's less prescriptive. So we try to give owners the opportunity to sort of pick a lease to locals tenant off of the PlaceMate website by posting the property, but a lot of them just want to do it themselves. It's kind of like an arm's length transaction. Like, oh, I know my cleaner's daughter really needs a place, or a lot of it has been people that have a first degree or second degree connection to the potential tenant. A neighbor, I know they're losing their place, and we could forego using our back cottage for a year for them. So I think that actually plays to our advantage a little bit. If they know each other, there might be more of a gentle letdown after, to kind of go back to your question, after the 1 year. And then layering onto what Brian's point was, I think it would make a lot of sense to think about how do you envision this relaunching as a multi-year program, 2-3 years. That's the mindset I'm trying to get even Provincetown into in infancy, to say, hey, we should start thinking about, I know we haven't launched, but we should start thinking about what happens at month 12, because owners are going to ask us and tenants are going to be apprehensive, just like you said. So I think I know your previous background, so you're probably very acutely aware of the insecurity of housing on 12-month leases, but we'd like to get ahead of that and could certainly tailor the program accordingly.
Thank you again. Very helpful.
I have a question, and I don't know that anybody here is qualified to answer it, but I'm going to ask it. It seems to me that if a homeowner comes to the program for subsidy with a tenant already selected from their sphere of influence, that there's potentially a fair housing question. And that gives me concern and pause. I worry about that. I'm not asking that question of anybody, but I'm just making the statement.
Brian, isn't that just fair market? Isn't that how I think it sounds like what you guys are struggling with is the non-lottery. Does that make sense?
Which is how we sell for fair housing. Okay, there's a handful of hands. Penny first.
Yeah, just quickly, one of the elements that I struggle with is using public funds for a private venture, and what that would look like in terms of navigation with the federal fair housing and state laws.
Like I would hope that somebody who already has a tenant in mind in their sphere of influence is already moving forward. Anyway, would move forward regardless of subsidy. That's what I would find. It would be interesting to see if the program could offer tax subsidy against the income on the rental as an opportunity to offer incentive, which is not the good neighbor that Christy was mentioning. But if market rate was $4,000 and they rented it for $3,000, and there was a $10,000 or $12,000 annual gift through the program, that could be an interesting way to do it. I'm going to come to Vicky first, and then I'll come to Meg.
So Brian, in response to your question, I think that it goes back to what Penny is alluding to, that this is using public funds for a private benefit. And when you're going to not participate in a so-called lottery or a matching system, then you're opening yourself up, I think, to some fair housing complaints. It would be the same thing as an affordable housing unit. If you're not going to participate in a lottery, then I think that becomes problematic using public funds. And so anyway, I think that careful consideration has to be made when someone comes and says, I have a tenant, then I would say, they need to enter the lottery like everybody else and, be matched. But anyway,
thank you.
I think
Thank you, Vicky. And maybe that's a program policy change and how it gets administered, but I think we need to be sensitive to that. Meg? I lost you. You were there, then you moved. Oh, you're on mute.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me now?
Gotcha.
I think this is a conversation about preservation. If someone already has a tenant or a tenant in mind, then this is more of the conversation about preservation and maintaining year-round housing rather than creating new year-round housing more so. And so I think it's a separate conversation. I don't want to forego the whole concept of lease to locals because people may have existing tenants or a existing tenant in mind, and say that that's, you know, restricting fair housing, whereas it's more so just encouraging homeowners to continue to rent year round, which I think is extremely valid and should be part of our mission moving forward. We do very much want to incentivize and hopefully subsidize people to rent year round and not restrict it to new opportunities. And I think that if we're thinking about this in terms of, oh, you know, do the greater good or doing things, if there's someone in your world who you're thinking of renting to and it's fiscally, it does not make sense for you fiscally to rent year round versus seasonally, and you need to make the unfortunate call that you're going to switch to some kind of a seasonal rental structure, I don't think that we should be putting the weight of those decisions on individual homeowners and expecting them to solve for our housing crisis. I think we need to consider ways to subsidize that. So I feel like I think we're not the first town to have this conversation, and I'm sure that there are ideas out there and ways that other towns have used town funding to subsidize programs for existing rentals.
So just to be clear, Meg, the lease to locals program is a creation program because for rentals, it's not a preservation program.
Yep, I'm clear about that. I'm
Okay,
saying,
I was
I think
confused.
that you know, lease to locals 2.0 could have an arm where it's a preservation as well. Because right now it's restricting, am I understanding this correctly, Julia, through you, Brian, that right now it's restricting its funding to new creations of year-round rentals, right?
Correct.
Right. So I think I can imagine lease to locals 2.0 including preservation as well.
Got it. Okay, I'll come to Christy and then to Julia.
Thank you. In kind of preparing for this, I did speak with John Giorgio about kind of some of the concerns around fair housing. And what he said is, kind of to paraphrase, is that if the town enters into any sort of contract, whether it's directly with Placemate or with Act Now Community Initiatives, we would put something in the language of the contract that indemnifies the town from being held responsible for anything, and making sure that there's controls in place that the program aligns with fair housing. So I think that's just one way that the town would do to protect itself.
Thank you, Christy. Julia?
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Chrissy. That's really helpful. And I could think of one other that the town currently may not be exactly apples to apples, but through the contract review committee, human health services line items or budget in the town pays for, Tom, you would know more about this than I do, but allocates money to rental assistance. And that's for, sort of existing tenants with existing landlords, and there's no real, there's no lottery certainly, but I'm glad that town council's been looking at it.
Okay, so there's a lot of great conversation here. With that, does anybody have any more for today? Seeing no reaction. Colin, thank you for the full presentation and the willingness to answer all the questions, kind of address the ideas. Hopefully we can come back to this in the not so far off future with some of the things we've talked about, thought through a little more. Appreciate it.
Great, thank you. I'm gonna log off.
Okay, great. With well, I'll leave it at that. Where did I leave my agenda? So it's 135, 137 Orange Street RFP Review Committee update. With that, I'll come to you, Christy.
Yes. So this is just an update to the trust. The RFP for 135 and 137 Orange Street was issued last year, and we had one respondent that had been reviewed by an RFP committee. And last week, the week before, we did have to reject the single proposal that we received. I did forward the correspondence from the Finance Committee and the Chief Procurement Officer. But the main criteria was that in part of the RFP was the financial feasibility evaluation, and that no financial support from the town except for the contribution of the proposed land was one of the criterias. And the proposal that we received was requesting about $15 million in support from the Affordable Housing Trust. So I think it's good if you guys go back and watch the video that's posted on YouTube. But Brian Turbot and John Giorgio worked through several different scenarios to try to figure out, could we go back and, discuss the financials and work with the developer in their one proposal, but they felt that that was negotiating and that unlevels the playing field for people who might have potentially submitted an RFP if they knew that they could have negotiated after the fact. So we really kind of had no other option other than to reject it. So I just wanted to let the board know that we kind of moving into the next agenda item. We are working to reissue the RFP as soon as possible because we do want those units built as soon as we can.
Thank you, Christy. I'm going to come to Tom, then Penny, then Dave. Go ahead, Tom.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to comment real quickly that to echo Christie's comments that I was on the committee for 135, 137, and the video that's posted is very short, and Brian Turbot gives a very concise answer on the details of why we had to dissolve that bid. So if anybody's interested, please do check it out.
Thank you, Tom. Penny?
Yeah, just a question on the new RFPs. Are we going to issue those as a group, as a bundle, and the
We're going to come to those in the next agenda item.
Oh, I thought we were already there. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, in one moment. Dave?
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I'll go back and watch that video because I think it'll answer a lot of my questions. But are we setting ourselves up to and I know procurement's complex. Are we setting ourselves up for this problem going forward again?
So I think the goal is to pre-solve for that problem moving forward. And Christy's going to give us a presentation on the next item. I don't want to call it a presentation because I don't know if there's slides, but talk to us about the and such.
Perfect. Thank you.
So does anybody want to talk more about the kind of the rejection of the previous RFP? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to mention when we had the meeting with the representatives from Bond Council, they made it very clear that developer participation has to be going forward at a considerably higher level. I mean, that's what I took away from that meeting. All right, that's it. That's all I'm going to say about that. Thanks.
Okay, great. Tucker?
Great.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say, as one of the folks who sat on the review committee, that, obviously disappointing to have to reject a proposal that, clearly a lot of work went into, but certainly understand the rationale for the rejection. But I just really wanted to say thank you to the proposers for putting the time and effort into their proposal.
Great. Thank you, Tucker. Any more on the original RFP? Okay. Thank you. Okay, so now we'll come to the next item. So it's request for proposals discussion on 135, 137, 7 Amelia, 12 Bartlett, and 16 Vesper. Christy, I will come to you to lead us through this conversation.
Yes. So no presentation with slides.
Okay.
But after the rejection of 135, 137 Orange Street, I immediately met with Brian Turbot to discuss the other RFPs that the trust has approved, but that we were waiting to issue, and that's for 7 Amelia and for 12 Bartlett. We do also have another parcel, which is 16 Vesper, but that was just recently, we just went through the land swap with the Cottage Hospital, so that RFP has not been created yet. And what Brian Turbett and I are doing is putting together a small kind of internal work group. And we're also using expertise of Laura Schufelt, who was on the RFP committee and works with Mass Housing. And we're going to review a way to bundle the RFPs so that we can issue them all at the same time. And obviously looking at ways around language and funding and everything that we've learned from bond counsel and our financial advisors as to how we could put the language in the RFP that, you know, the town may be able to contribute at some way, but as was mentioned, the significant amount of the funding needs to come from the developer or other sources. So we're working through how that is possible and working with town council. But the idea is that like one developer could bid on all 4 projects, or they might be able to do an a la carte. And so we're still kind of working through that process of how it might look. But our goal is to get things out in kind of the next 60 days to reissue those RFPs.
And just for a matter of public clarification, I'm going to run through a unit count. So please correct me if I'm wrong. But 135, 137 Orange Street is potentially up to 32 units.
Yes.
7 Amelia is potentially up to 2 units or 3?
3.
3. 12 and 12R Bartlett is 16? Or am I wrong?
16 to 19 units.
16 to 19 units, and 16 Vesper is up to potentially 19 units.
I think so.
All from memory. Mic drop. Okay, so questions for Christy on the concept of us getting these 60 out in the next 60 days? What my question, what would be the potential, what will be the time period if it goes out in 60 days for responses needing to come back? What are we looking at for a community timeline award?
So in talking with Brian Turbett in the procurement process, it would be 60 days that the RFP would be out and receiving bids in. And then we would need the committees, a committee to form and review the RFPs, which could be probably another 45 days. That's kind of, you know, as fast as possible would be that timeline.
So that's a little over 6 months, just for clarity. Okay. Rima?
Through you, Brian, to Christy, given the fact that we have line items in our budget for each of these properties, our potential subsidies for development, is there a way that just we could do the math as a, you know, potential? We know how much the rejected proposal was asking for. We know how much we had kind of set aside for potential subsidy. Perhaps we could figure out a percentage or ratio that could be incorporated in the RFP saying that, you know, the town, it's possible that the town could subsidize up to blah, blah, blah % of construction costs. Is that, hopefully somebody can look into that, because obviously that clause, you know, I don't know why it was there when we already had budget, you know, line items in our budget for development. So that's just a thought.
Thank you, Rima. Any more on that? So I guess we're just standing by for a greater update, Christy, or not a greater update, but more progress. Item 11. So with that, we'll close item 10. We'll open item 11, annual town meeting housing articles review. Where should we start?
Okay, so this was a request at the last trust meeting to take a look at articles leading up to annual town meeting, and this is strictly just for informational purposes. You know, these go through FinCom and Planning Board and everybody else for comments, but just a chance for the trust to take a look at the articles. So I'm happy to share my screen and run through what they are, and we can either stop one by one, or you guys can stop me and ask questions as we're going. Okay, so these are the articles that are related to housing for the May 7th annual town meeting. So running through them, Article 8, that's the appropriation for the town's operating budget, and that's where the town admin would be transferring $6.6 million to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. That's the override that was approved last year. Okay, not seeing any hands. Feel free to just shout out if you have questions. Article 20, this is the appropriation for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and this is where we are asking for authorization to borrow $45 million. I think this will be important to review at a future trust meeting, but I went through it with the FinCom as Remo was just mentioning, what are the potential subsidies at future projects and the different programs that we see coming online in the next kind of 18 to 24 months. And those costs are upwards of $45 million. It's really important that we kind of get the word to the community that this request is for us to borrow using the funds from the override. So that $6.5 million that we'll receive annually, we'll be using that to service this debt. So it's not an additional ask on the taxpayers or any change to the tax base. So I just want to make sure that we're all getting that message out to the community.
And Christy, that received a positive recommendation from the finance department? Yes,
I did mean to put through the FinCom recommendations, but I just got it this morning. So I can send an updated thing to the trust.
Great. Penny, Penny's got her hand up. You're on mute, Penny. We're having traveling device issue.
It's so awful.
There you go. You got it.
I've been working the entire time I'm down here. Anyway, I watched that FinCom meeting, and what was interesting to me was we're talking about deploying approximately 1/2 of that 6.6 in order to bond the 45, right? To borrow the 45.
Correct.
Okay, so that's an important thing too, because we're not spending the whole thing. And it was 6.5, and is it now 6.6 because it's been invested?
So that has a 2.5% increase each year.
Yep, because of Proposition 2.5. Thank you.
Thank you, Penny. Christy, floor is yours.
Okay. So Article 38, this is a zoning bylaw amendment, and this would increase the maximum height to 40 feet when 25% of the units in the structure are eligible for inclusion on the SHI list in both CMI and CN districts. And I see Dave has his hand up.
Little planning board info for us.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out on a couple of these zoning related initiatives for affordable housing that they fall in. Typically the quantum of vote is 2/3, but with recent legislation, some of these will fall into just a simple majority vote because of the housing implications. And I believe that 38 is one of them. 42, I believe, is one of them. For some unknown reason, unfortunately, 58, I don't believe is, and maybe Ann can correct me. And I think that's it for the zoning initiatives we have there. So just informational. Thanks.
Thank you, Dave. Article 42 is a zoning bylaw amendment, and this would allow the planning board to waive the open space restriction on a flex development. Again, if at least 25% of the development is for affordable housing. Dave?
It's kind of a misnomer. We've been trying to work out. We did not give the ability to waive open space. What we did was we gave the ability for somebody different to hold the CR, which is the conservation restriction on that open space. As Billy Cassidy could come before us and describe the pains that he has had to get somebody to hold the HR on the open space in front of that. It's kind of disruptive to the process. So what we've done is we've opened that up and have allowed far more people to hold that restriction on the open space. Even the planning board could hold it, the select board could hold it, when before there was a very limited list on who could hold that open space. So the hope is that it just opens it up, makes it easier to do a flex development with affordability to it, and find someone to hold the CR. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. I'm actually going to go back to you for Article 58. The planning board made an adjustment last week, and so Dave was going to walk us through what Article 58 does. You're muted, Dave.
Somehow I hit some button that didn't let me unmute. So I apologize. So 58 came back to us. We called a special meeting, and it came back to us because it was pointed out that we didn't have a carve out for municipalities. So in other words, if the town was going to do a project, which of course would be housing for either workforce or affordable, that we would be held to Article 58. So we carved out a waiver for them. At the same time, we carved out the possibility of a waiver for 501c3s. And how that works is if you're coming to use, you're coming and 58 applies to you, and you're a 501c3 with an educational component, the building inspector, the head of the building department can issue a waiver on 58 for you. So in other words, we're opening this up so it doesn't affect nonprofits or the municipalities. But unfortunately, at the same time, a ruling was passed down, and that said, and this kind of gets in the technical weeds. I know Ann wasn't pleased about it. We were stuck, having to follow town council's opinion. But this lawsuit came down and basically said that we as a municipality cannot put in zoning bylaws that would have an impact on as right development. So in other words, that isn't as at odds with the state's Subdivision Control Act. So in other words, if you can subdivide by right, then we can't put in a zoning bylaw that changes that. So unfortunately, we've had to strip it down so that it really is only going to affect it's going to affect units instead of plots of land. I think that the positive end to this is that if we can get this on the books and we can get this passed through town meeting, and there's other legal cases that challenge that ruling by the state, then we can build on 58 in the future at another town meeting. But I think it's important to try to at least get it on, even though I think it may have limited impact. But again, it's a tool. If it works twice, 3 times, 5 times, it's worth it. And if something changes in the litigation, then maybe we can give it a little more oomph, if that makes sense to you.
Penny?
Yeah, just quickly, Dave, I don't know if you know the answer to this, but has anybody in the Plus department modeled this? In other words, looked backwards and said how many units would this have created in the last 3 years? Anything like that?
No one has, but I think the general consensus is that with the changes because of the lawsuit, and even before the changes, I mean, we don't have that many big pieces of land left. But I think again, this is just going to be a tool that even if it's only used a few times and creates housing, it's worthy.
Thank you.
It doesn't have a carrying cost.
And why don't you come in on it?
Yep, thank you. So Dave, that was a good summary of what transpired. And I just want to make a distinction about, just coming away from the meeting, thinking about it. I get it. There were two differing legal opinions, and the town council was advising that the town would be exposed to lawsuits. So totally get that. Understand why we're not doing subdivision. So that part I don't have as much of a problem as, in fact, yes, there were two waivers, the municipal and the nonprofit waiver, but additionally, there was a waiver. It gives the ability to the planning board to waive the entire thing, provided that the board finds that there's a community housing benefit in compliance with the master plan and the housing production plan. So that's the part that felt really watered down, as it seems discretionary in a way where it's not as ironclad, and I don't think we're going to be getting the number of units that we really could have gotten. I mean, it just kind of kept getting watered down. At the end of the day, happy that the planning board endorsed something, the FinCom endorsed something, and as Dave said, something's going to get on the books. And then potentially in the future, we can amend this to make it more just prescriptive rather than discretionary. So just wanted to clarify that that was the thing that made me more upset than the actual, I get the lawsuits. Nobody wants to expose the town to lawsuits. And I understand that the town's going to be the one to pay for that, not us as article proposers.
Thank you, Ann. Dave?
And Ann is 100% right, and I apologize for leaving that out. I will say though that, Ann, I think you should take at least a little bit of solace that the planning board usually defers to affordable housing projects almost 100% of the time. So I get it, and I hear where you're coming from, and hopefully we can tighten it up in the future.
Exactly.
Back to you, Christy.
And I applaud all of
Oh.
Ann's efforts. Just, I want to make sure that everyone understands how hard she really did work on this, and I applaud it. So thank you.
I agree with that. And as considered as a private citizen working in non-for-profit, good for you for putting a very complicated article together and getting it to the table. Christy?
Thank you. So the last two articles are home rule petitions. They're Articles 79 and 80. In 79, the trust has reviewed, this is the Community Housing Bank real estate transfer fee with the same language that we've been submitting each year. And Article 80 is the home rule petition to authorize a year-round housing occupancy restriction, or what we've been discussing as a year-round deed restriction. Not out of time, I just noted the municipal housing related articles, but they're not directly related to the Affordable Housing Trust. So I'm happy to answer any questions about articles, or we can move on to the next agenda item.
Seeing none, do you want to just take a moment, no questions on the affordable housing ones? Do you want to just take a moment and mention the municipal housing ones?
Sure. So Article 11 is a town employee feasibility costs. This is both for a town meeting, and it will be on the election. to vote on, and this would authorize the town to appropriate funds for a feasibility study for developing municipal housing on town-owned lands. So there's kind of several lots that the town owns, and trying to put together what could be built and what would be the priority of what to build first. And Article 12 is the acquisition of 31 Western Ave, which is the Star of the Sea Youth, formerly the Star of the Sea Youth Hostel. And again, this would be at town meeting and also on the election ballot. And this would be used for municipal use, which would be for seasonal housing for lifeguards and others. Article 90, I just pulled in because it had housing in its potential use, but that is really looking for, I think, other municipal uses, but maybe down the line might potentially have a housing component.
Thank you, Christy. Vicky?
So Article 99 most likely will not go for, it may be pulled. Because originally this was going to be also for pumping station location. And my understanding is that that is probably not going to go forward for that purpose. So I'm not sure what will happen to this lot for municipal housing purposes.
Thank you, Vicky. Meg?
Thanks, Brian. Can I just ask a clarification question? How is the town able to appropriate spending for housing restricted to lifeguards?
It's not necessarily restricted to lifeguards. It would be for seasonal use, but that's under our zoning bylaw. The municipal use would allow that.
So as a follow-up question, could the town utilize funds to provide housing restricted for municipal use, specifically for teachers?
I'm gonna let Vicky answer this one, but from my understanding from town council, we can use funds for municipal employees.
Correct. Okay. So I guess I'm not understanding the differentiation between the youth hostel and then doing something restricted to, say, another group like teachers. How is that able to be? Is it restricted to seasonal people working for the harbor master?
I think the point is that it needs to be defined in the article that the funding source comes from. And then, is that right, Vicky? Vicky, are you, I guess the question.
I'm having trouble with my, I'm sorry, having trouble with my computer. I'm not sure you can hear me. Can you hear me?
We can. Yeah, we got you.
Okay. Okay. So this property, first of all, it can be used for municipal purpose. Okay. And so if a municipal purpose is deemed to be housing for municipal employees, so that's how you can allow for municipal employees to be housed in this facility. It's $6 million acquisition cost for this property, by the way. And it's going to need a 2/3 vote. So question as to whether this is going to pass.
So the follow-up, so Meg's follow-up, Vicky, is can the town look for municipal housing for teachers who work for the school system? That right, Meg? Is that clearly stated?
I mean, I'm using teachers as an example because it's just easy to, it's an easy example, but yes. I'm curious about the opportunity for restricting housing for particular groups of municipal employees.
Well, that's going to have to pass muster, and I'm just not sure that, I mean, you can,
Sure.
but you know, again, it's going to have to be approved. And right now, this isn't designated for a specific group. So.
Okay. I feel like if we can get seasonal housing for lifeguards approved at town meeting by 2/3 vote, we should certainly consider the opportunity to get year-round housing for teachers approved by, you know, annual town meeting. So that was
But I don't think
And
that just necessarily going to be limited to, you know, it's not necessarily going to be for that specific purpose.
Right, it would be for any seasonal housing, seasonal municipal employee.
Right.
And would that then have to go through like a lottery process? No.
I can't.
No, because it wouldn't be income restricted. It wouldn't need a lottery.
I'm just trying to understand the ins and outs, so I appreciate your patience in explaining those things to me.
And just to add to that, the FinCom hasn't put forth a recommendation on this. That's going to happen at, I think, the meeting right before town meeting, because the town was still doing its due diligence on this project.
Thank you, Christy. Tucker, did you have a follow-up?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, I just was going to say, Vicky can correct me if I'm wrong here, but you know, seasonal housing is a different animal to year-round housing, and the fair housing rules are different. I mean, fair housing is applying to year-round, and unless there is special dispensation, like the housing associated with the sewer plant, that was part of the permitting process to create the sewer plant and approved by the state to create that, you'd be testing new ground to specifically restrict housing for the municipality, to specifically restrict housing to a certain portion of municipal employees. Have I got it close, Vicky?
No, you've got it right. I mean, this property envisions 31 Worcester Ave envisions right now a seasonal use. More like a dormitory style as well. I mean, you know, it's not going to be apartment living, certainly in there.
Meg, follow up on that, or good for now? Good for now? Okay. Christy, any more on the warrant articles that you want to cover?
No, thank you.
Okay. So sticking with town meeting, communication strategy for town meeting.
So we designated last meeting for Meg to be kind of our liaison for the trust to the housing staff. And Meg, myself, and Ellis have met to put together a communication strategy leading up to town meeting, to kind of roll out information around the articles, and working with the communications department. So we do have a follow-up meeting this week with the communications department from town admin, and trying to roll out things such as you know, a housing newsletter, information in Libby's newsletter, the monthly town meeting town admin newsletter, and also rolling out just some short videos, if we can pull it off, just to talk about affordable housing in the community. So there'll be more to follow at the next meeting, but just wanted to give a preliminary update.
Okay, great. We'll carry that to the next meeting. And now year-round deed restriction program. Judy, I'll come to you. Thank you for your patience. We've got a long one today. Do you want to present? And then I think Vicky had some edits, and then we'll kind of kick it around.
Your meetings are always interesting, so it's not a problem to stay on. You guys come up with things that nobody else does. So I think I'm just looking for a final direction from you folks about any changes you want me to make to these guidelines. And Vicky, I appreciated your comments. I'm fine. I just want direction from you folks. And I had peppered that draft with, with some questions for you folks that are sort of policy in nature. Brian, I know you had some thoughts on some of them. Other folks simply hadn't had a chance to look at this the last time we met. So I don't know if you've had a chance to look at it now, but I would like to kind of finish this up, because one of the things we had talked about doing as part of this was getting back to the people who participated in the interviews in the fall, just to let them know kind of what's coming forward. And I can't do that until we sort of get through this process. So has anybody had a chance to look back at this more, at some of the questions that we had raised, to give me some feedback so I can finish this up for you?
Thank you, Judy. Show of hands. Dave, then Penny, then Rima.
As always, Judy.
Oh.
And this is a weird one, but just because I might be right around that age, are we gonna peg retirement at 65?
That's, you tell me. I'm 70.
Yeah, it seems like maybe we should drop that a little bit, but I don't know. But other than that, it all seemed really good to me. I'm sure people will find things that aren't, but I think it's a great starting point.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Penny? I kind of agree with you. I wonder if can you eliminate age altogether with retirement? Because somebody could just be in retirement.
I don't know why not.
Yeah. Anyhow, Penny? No? Rima? Standing back.
I know, I was trying to get it up on the screen, and the packet's like 4,000 pages long, so I was scrolling through in my email. I think one of the things that we might want to talk about is the cap, come up with some kind of pricing. That was the one that stood out to me as far as, a pilot program. Where do we want to start with these kinds of subsidies, or how are they going to look? And again, for me, rather than a cash payout, I really see the benefit of a tax benefit to them, because they go, in perpetuity with, however long the deed is restricted. So that would be my thing that I think maybe we'd like to look at.
That's an interesting idea. I wonder, Christy, if the good neighbor agreement on the rental has any opportunity for deed restriction, reoccurring tax abatement opportunity. Tom?
I think I'm good, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Dave, coming back to you.
Just to kind of piggyback on Rima's idea there, I think it could be a combination of both, because I mean, like, listen, you need to have honey to attract bees, or wherever which way it goes. And so I just think that a tax abatement on a property that has a $4,000 tax bill, it's going to be years before you're going to really achieve a meaningful amount of money. And I think we're looking to really get some houses under year-round restriction as quickly as we can. And I think that maybe a combination of both is a better approach. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. For me, I think that's important that a lot of the programs that you looked at, Judy, sorry, everybody moved, that you looked at were just on the buy side. And I worry that if our program is strictly on the buy side, because of the high cost of real estate and the lack of inventory, we're looking at a very, very slow acquisition of restriction process. So I keep coming back to how do we, in my mind, develop this in a way to keep people in their homes because it's getting expensive, that will then, be a longer term opportunity for someone new to be in them. So I keep putting that out there.
There's no reason why this can't be done that way. I will tell you, because we've kind of done a national survey of these for another client. We have not run into the sort of tax abatement model, which is interesting to me, but state laws, kind of determine how much latitude communities have to do certain things. So there could in fact be some statutory constraint that I'm just simply not aware of. But there's nothing that says you can't do that. If you want to design this program to have more tools in it, I think that's fine if there's no particular legal constraint to doing so.
Okay. Thank you, Judy. Tom, and then Shanta.
Yeah, just a quick comment on page 3 on the primary residence under program requirements.
Yeah.
We talked a while ago about making it at least 10 months a year. And I was looking at the home rule petitions for Provincetown and Wellfleet, and those are both 11 months a year. And I'm not saying we should change it, but I just found that interesting that we have chosen 10. Yeah. But
And to your point, some of the I would say probably half the interviews we did to come up with this, people were taking the position that year round should truly be year round. Like maybe you for vacation, but you're living there 12 months as your principal residence. So people have different views on this. And again, it's a policy decision, and you guys get to direct me on what that's going to be.
And if I remember the conversations, we followed the 10 months because that's the housing covenant setup, and it was kind of an easy model to follow. Yes. I don't know that that's not open for discussion. Vicky, I'm sorry, on this item, Vicky, and then we'll come back to Chantal.
So that's exactly why we had decided on the 10. We arrived at some sense of uniformity with the other number of months that was already in town programs. So everyone agreed in the trust that was probably the best number to go with. You're correct, Tom. Provincetown has 11, and there's we're still going up to the State House. We're going to still be waiting for our bill anyway. But it is currently it's currently 10.
Shall talk to you.
Thank you. About the abatement. I just want to remind everyone that the town currently has a program where folks of a certain age can come in and volunteer for a few hours and have their taxes waived. And I can tell you, as someone who's runs a department that has signed up to accept folks for the last 2 years, we've never gotten an applicant in the 2 years. And I've even reached out to find out, do they just not want to work in my department, or are they just not signing up and they're not signing up? So I'm like, I'll bring cookies every day. They're not signing up. So while I'm not opposed to dangling that carrot, I think that we should most certainly have other alternatives for attracting folks. And then as for the 10-month versus 11-month, just thinking of my time at Housing Nantucket, I know that there were issues with folks skirting that with that 10-month year-round for the Covenant program. I'm not sure how Anne has dealt with that. Granted, I worked there probably like 10 years ago. It's been a while. I'm sure she's worked out some solution for how to deal with that. But I know while I was there, there were some problematic folks in the Covenant program that were skirting that 10-month and breaking the rules in that way. So we should probably think about whether or not, based on what Anne and Housing Nantucket has done since then, whether or not that 10-month is wise, or if we need to expand that to the 11 months to really hold people to truly being suffering with us in February. So.
Okay, Meg, Penny, Vicky.
I would second or voice my support for extending the limit or the requirement to 11 months. I think that this is a really important tool in our toolbox, but it also comes with a big price tag. If we're thinking about average cost of housing right now, even if you went with like a $2.5 million property, if you did 15% of that or whatever we decide, you know, however that ends up working out, these are big spends for single units. Obviously we're not producing them, but it's still a single unit. And I think that it should be the biggest bang for our buck. And on the flip side, I think we want to utilize the program. So I think if we're going to put a restriction on how much we spend on the year-round deed restriction program, I think we should try to accommodate at least 10 a year. So if you want to do that math out, you know, I'm not sure if it's maybe, I don't know how much the budget allows for, Christy. So I would be supportive of something along those lines. So just wanted to share that thought. And I also think we need to be realistic with what we're asking of homeowners. This is a long-term, this is a permanent commitment. You know, this you're permanently changing your house to a year-round only. You're permanently giving up your right to rent in the summer and make that income. So you deserve the incentive, you deserve the compensation, but you should have to meet the requirements of the program. And I don't think there should be a tit for tat. I don't think there should be any opportunity for someone to pick and choose the ways that they're recouping the money that they could get on in the fair market. So I see this as a truly year-round program, and I think that our language should reflect that. Thanks.
Thanks, Mike. Judy, I have a clarification before we go to Vicky and Penny. So in the pilot program, we will be able to fund up to people making 240% AMI, which will then qualify them for a certain mortgage value or house price, which then there'll be some buy-in subsidy amount, right? So I think it's important that we figure out the math and calculate what part of the market we're talking about. So you mentioned 2.4 meg, but I think that 240 AMI doesn't support that high of a price point at the moment. So I think that that's important. And then how we calculate the 240, is it just mortgage expense or is it all of the other housing costs, taxes, insurance?
So typically in an affordable housing program for home ownership, it's principal, interest, taxes, and insurance.
Okay. I think we need to do that math so we understand what the true value of where we're gonna, in creating a pilot, to how many units we're going for, Meg, to your point, we're looking for. And which side, if not both of the market, are we working on? Just the buy side or the buy and side? Okay, Vicky, to you.
So this program right now, the way it's designed, has 10 months in it, but it's important to realize that the home rule petition that we have filed has 10 months. And so at this point, that's the amount that's going forward at town meeting, is a 10-month restriction. So I just feel like, you know, you voted on it. I'm concerned that if you're going to get to town meeting and change it, it could be a little bit confusing to people and open it up to a can of worms of why you've chosen 10, now you're going to 11. You know, it could be problematic for the article itself. So just for your consideration.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Vicky. Penny?
Yeah, was there any discussion in developing this of interfamily transfers?
I don't know that there was extensive discussion. I felt that as long as the property continued to be maintained occupied year round, can you help me understand what you're thinking, Penny?
It just hopped out at me because it wasn't called out specifically.
I think whomever places the restriction on the property continues, and whether on the property itself, not the ownership of the property.
Understood, but I think that is a very sort of initial likelihood source of use of this.
Oh, okay. So you're saying not in the purchase of the property, but in a interfamily designation to a new owner, that it could be captured.
A seller sells to a relative.
Right.
Thank you.
Rima?
Yeah, what's not addressed here are properties with more than one dwelling unit on them. And I don't know if we should designate saying a dwelling unit on the property, or if all of it has to be year round, which I think would be a little restrictive, but or say the primary, something like that. I think that kind of needs to be figured out because there are so many properties with multiple, and looks like Vicky has an answer.
That makes the property calculation valuation incredibly complicated. Either the future creation of another structure and or just throwing that out there. Vicky, sorry.
So, I mean, if you're going, so these restrictions are going to be recorded at the Registry of Deeds. They're going to run with the property. So unless you have created a separate lot on the property that can designate, you know, a separate parcel of land that restriction will then run with, you know,
all the residents.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
I don't see how you're going to get around it. It
All right.
really is going to become very confusing
Right.
to just say it's only going to be with a building, but what's the land that goes with it? And is there a deed that runs with just that one building? And I think you have to create lawfully another lot or
Well,
I think it becomes a
and I
problem in
think it should
75
say-
years when the building has various iterations or went away
Yeah.
and came back.
it should probably say dwelling unit and maybe S in parentheses, just to indicate that if there was more than one dwelling unit on the property, all of them are under the restriction.
so you could say the land with the buildings thereon.
Okay. All right.
And leave it at that.
Okay.
Would be subject to.
So people understand that, you know, then they can't, you know, could they then rent year round, you know, one of the additional units? Because I know that rentals were talked about, maybe that's where the rentals happen that are year round.
Right, and again, because I was asked to go and talk to people, what I heard almost universally, not entirely, but almost universally, was that the program should focus on home ownership. And I know that long-term, that may not be what you want to do. But because this is a pilot and because I was trying to respond to what I heard, that's why you don't see the multiple unit rental situation in here, because I was trying to design something around what the community engagement process. So
yeah, I'm just
that doesn't
thinking
mean you're
about,
stuck with it, but I want you to know where I was coming from.
okay, because, you know, primary and secondary on a lot, not like, you know, apartments.
But if I may, if you're going to say acquire, if you're going to have this year-round restriction on your property, nothing would prohibit, and there are two buildings, a primary and a secondary. There's nothing, I don't think, that would be in the restriction that would prohibit you from renting out your other building. The one thing you're providing, though, is year-round there's a year-round housing component for the property. And then if you, as the property owner, want to rent out that secondary dwelling, I think you can. I don't think that there would be.
Okay,
any
as
reason that
a
you couldn't.
year-round unit.
As a year-round unit, you could.
Okay,
you know,
that's good. All right, maybe that needs to be clarified somewhere.
Yeah, Judy, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we would have the restriction that would prohibit being able to rent out
No,
a unit that's on the property.
I wasn't anticipating that.
Okay.
Great, thanks.
Well, Dave.
And in the end, if there's 3 units on the property, they're only really forfeiting, you know, a short-term rental or a different kind of situation with that one secondary unit, because the tertiary is going to be year-round anyway, restricted.
Right.
So, but yeah, I mean, the idea is to create year-round housing units, and if someone's willing to sell us a restriction on a piece of property that has 2 housing units on it, it's a bonus. I mean, the more beds we get, the better. And I think that we should think about that when we're crafting these restrictions. I'm not saying to give away the farm, but we need to make this attractive, because really the aim is to get as many dwellings into this program as we possibly can. And if we get too crazy complex with the regulations and restrictions, we're going to reduce the amount of people that are attracted to it. Thank you.
So from here, Judy, how do you take these kind of commentary and move them to a place that, we as a group are looking to fund a pilot to put it out there?
Yep.
And if I understand correctly, Vicky, we have the ability, as long as this is funded under 240%, to proceed forward prior to the home rule petition at town meeting.
Correct. The trust has the ability and the authority to be able to hold a restriction on a piece of property. So could I just raise a
Please.
question?
Yes.
So I sent to Judy in my comments, I don't know if anybody other than Judy saw it, but I raised the question about these employee guidelines and requirements that you were trying to impose. And I guess I'm concerned about the fact that you want to be able to attract people who maybe are coming to work on the island who don't have, a place to live, whether it's because they're being hired as a municipal employee or a private employee, say a doctor or a nurse, and they have no place to live now. And if you're not able to do that, and they have to be an employee currently living there, then how do you get them a place to live? It just doesn't seem like it matches.
I wouldn't do that for the permanent program. Bear in mind, I have to keep coming back to this. My charge was to work on this pilot.
Okay.
Part of what I was trying to do was respond to what we heard and also try to keep this as simple as possible to administer. Because I can almost guarantee you that once you have a year or two under your belt with this, you're going to want to change it again. Because every program we've talked to in the United States has changed their program over time. So what we heard, and Vicky, I'm totally sympathizing with what you're saying, but again, because we're talking to people at this point who are already in Nantucket in some capacity or another, the concern was around people who were already here. And that would have a certain amount of marketing value to the community in terms of supporting this. I completely agree with you that one of the big problems that exists on Nantucket is people can't get employees because people can't find, they're offered a job and they can't take it because they can't find housing. So I think the trust just needs to decide within the confines of this pilot, do you want to make this a program that can support year-round employees in Nantucket, or people who've accepted a year-round position and are looking for housing, or do you want, for purposes of this pilot, to limit it in some way? And that's really, it's a policy decision to me. I get what Vicky's saying. What I'm feeding back to you was kind of what I heard.
Dave? You're on mute, Dave.
I kind of look at this as almost a stepping stone sort of situation with people like that. So, great efforts going into building more workforce housing. And I think that for those people coming on island, hopefully we can find them someplace similar to that to accommodate them. And then when they decide they really want to live here year round and buy a house, then this is the program for that. I think there's I don't think one program can address all the needs, and that's why we have so many of them. And I think that this is the program to capture and preserve our year-round community. Thanks.
Thanks, Dave.
So, Brian, to answer your question about where does this go, I need to finish the guidelines and get this done for you. My opinion is that part of our charge really should be to develop the application packet that goes with this, because guidelines alone don't do it. People have to know exactly what you need to receive in order to evaluate their application. So I'd like to kind of wrap this piece up give this back to you one more time. I think rather than holding you guys up this long on a meeting, I think for the next draft, it would be fine if maybe people just give their comments to Christy. Christy and I can get on Zoom or something and work through them and get this done. And I then would just suggest that we had told people at the trust request that we were going to get back to them, the folks we interviewed. So I would like to do that as well and, and wrap this up and be of whatever help you need going forward on this. But I want to get this package done for you.
So in the application, do we have the ability to include the restriction? So people truly understand the statement of what the restriction is?
So I would do that. A couple of the programs we looked at actually, well, you know what? They didn't have it in part of the package. They had it online. They had it on their website. So people who were applying would know full well kind of what the restriction is that they're signing on for. But the application itself was fairly simple, more streamlined.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's important that we have that prepared. And then I guess the challenge question to the trust and Meg's earlier point is, what is our goal for unit count, and can we work, or Judy and Christy work offline and kind of figure out what the number unit goal is and then the cost to propose for the first round of the pilot?
I think that's fine. I'm happy to get on Zoom anytime with Christy. Early morning, late afternoon, whatever, whatever's going to work for you and your family is fine. But yeah, we can do that.
Great. Thank you. Meg?
Thanks, Brian. I'm not sure if this is the right time, but I just wanted to ask a question about timing for everything, backing up to the communications agenda item, and then also this. I think we have a trust meeting scheduled for April 16th, which is school vacation week, and I don't know how that impacts attendance. And I wondered if we should meet before then.
We may need to move back to a twice a month schedule with a few special meetings in there. So we'll when we get to that moment on the agenda, we'll keep going. This is definitely too long of an agenda in general, since we still have a lot to go.
So the only thing I'll just mention to you, Brian, as long as this is coming up, is I'm going to be away for 2 weeks.
Great.
My God, I'm going to be away for 2 weeks. You need to know I'm really going to be away for 2 weeks. And so I will be gone for that first Tuesday in April, back the second one. So if you want me to participate, I just want you to know I'm not available April 2nd.
Great. Thank you for the heads up. Noted. Any more on this? I think we'll let Judy go. Thank you for sticking it out with us.
Good to see you all. All right. Talk soon. Bye-bye.
Okay, so that's on other business, and we'll talk about the agenda or the meeting schedule. As pointed out, we do have a holiday, school vacation week. Is there a general idea of who that impacts, or and how we're going to do? I will be here and continue to be available. Do people know who they want? Okay, Shanta, you won't be here. Is that what
I can join from wherever, no matter where I am. So don't worry about that. I'm just saying I have to go. I have a meeting that started 2 minutes ago. So
got it? Okay.
but my vote's on going back to 2 meetings, because we meet a lot and they're really long. I got a job. Anyway, bye guys. Keep on keeping on.
Thanks, Shanta. Anybody else impacted by the school vacation week in a negative attendance way? Okay. Meg?
I'll be I'll be away, but I may be able to attend with the time change. I think so, but it's I just can't give a definite.
Just let us know in advance, like when you get there, if you get good Wi-Fi or whatever, you think it's going to work or not. Then we'll just know whether to wait for you or move forward. Okay.
Okay.
Christy, there was some tenor that we may be looking for an additional meeting next week. Was that?
Yes. So I just think, given the amount of things in executive session as well, that we may need to meet next week. And just because Tucker and I have a conflict at 2, I didn't know if we could move to 12 o'clock next Tuesday. I'm just starting a little bit earlier.
That's fine for me.
Yeah.
Thumbs up from Tom. Meg, go ahead.
Christy, could you provide the agenda for that at your earliest convenience, and then I can try to attend for the things that may or may not need a vote or anything, particularly relevant to me. I'm gonna be off island taking my daughter to a doctor's appointment that's an hour and a half away, so if I can make it work with the driving and the appointment time.
Okay, I can do that.
Rima? Then Penny?
was first.
Okay.
Oh, just quickly, March 26th, I cannot attend until 1:30.
So, and my question was, this would be primarily an executive session.
I don't know that we can assume that.
Okay.
I'm deferring to Christy, but I know she's doing two things at once at the moment. Okay. So it looks like we're gonna try and schedule for 12, but we know Penny won't be there, and then Meg will find out as time goes, but we need 4 for whatever we're covering. Okay. Any more on scheduling, Christy? No? Okay. Board comments. Item 5. My only comment was this was a long agenda. We're not done. Thank you, everybody. We will work harder to keep the agenda shorter. With that,
Sorry, my calendar is getting more and more full every second, especially as we approach summer. So should we assume we're meeting on? So we're gonna meet the 26th, and then we're gonna meet the 16th. Should I assume we're meeting on the 30th and every other week moving forward for a little bit, or?
Yes.
I just make sure I reserve the time.
Yep, just block out the
It's like a
time.
huge chunk of my week, so I want to make sure it's actually going to be utilized.
Just go ahead and block out the week, and then we'll come back on either the next meeting or the 16th and finalize a schedule for the next 2 to 3 months.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Yep. We cleared board comments. Everybody's good with that. Item, let's say 16. Looking for a motion to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or real value of property where an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the body, so to adjourn to executive session, not to return to public session. Is there a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Okay, so moved by Rima, second from Penny by roll call. Meg Browers,
Aye.
Tom Dixon,
Aye.
Rima Sherry,
Aye.
Dave Iverson,
Aye.
Penny Dye,
Aye.
and Brian Sullivan's an aye. So 3-minute break and we'll come right back.
Yeah.
Christy, can you circulate the link as needed?
Yes.
Thank you.